Good morning. Yes, you guys are beautiful, even for this early in the morning. Before I start, I do just want to say thank you. This is Youth Sunday, and just thank you to you guys for allowing me to minister to our youth here. We've got a really great group of youth, and I'm really proud of everything they do. So just thank you guys for all of your support in that. And we've been doing a study on 1 Peter, which I'm going to be speaking from today. So we've gone really, really deep into this. So what I need to know ahead of time is, do you guys want the 12-minute version or the 90-minute version? So did I hear 90? Can somebody call the 10 o'clock people and let them know we're going to be running a little late? So, all right. So I remember a time when I worked in the corporate world, and I felt like I was doing all of the right things, but I still got the short end of the stick. I worked hard, I earned the respect of my peers, and I always looked for ways to improve how we worked. And when a certain promotion came up, everyone who knew me assured me that I was by far the most qualified and that I was a shoo-in for the role. Well, someone else got it. In fact, what I got was a trip to the corporate office where my boss worked so that he could tell me, Dan, I know you love your family and all, but don't let that get in the way of your career. You really do have a lot to offer. I was dumbfounded. I tried to be a genuine bright spot everywhere I went. And apparently, that was exactly the problem. Has anyone else ever been told in one way or another that who you are is the obstacle? Now, I want to be careful here. My story is one of frustration and disappointment. What Peter is writing to is something considerably harder. In our reading today from Peter's letter to the church scattered across Asia Minor, was likely written during the reign of Nero, Christians faced real hostility, real social rupture, and in some cases, very real persecution. Rome even called them atheists, not because they had no faith, but because their faith had no idol that Rome could recognize. And in those times, there was a code people followed. Peter, especially in this passage, is speaking specifically to the Hostafel. It's the Greco-Roman household structure for organizing social ethics. In this structure, it was the paterfamilias, usually the oldest living male, who had absolute legal authority over the extended household. And Peter works through this structure deliberately. He talks about governing authorities, and then in this passage he talks about servants, and then after this following he talks about wives and even husbands. And he's not skipping around, he's actually moving through the architecture of daily life. So when someone converted to Christianity without the paterfamilias converting, they were stepping outside of the household's religious identity. And that's not a small thing. That's social rupture. And Peter isn't endorsing the system. He's actually speaking pastorally into the situation that his readers can't immediately change. Into this structure, Peter starts by talking to the household servant, saying, "It is credit to you if, being aware of God, you endure pain while suffering unjustly. If you endure when you are beaten for doing wrong, what credit is that? But if you endure when you do right and suffer for it, you have God's approval." Pay attention to what's happening here. Now, the term often translated here as credit or commendable is charis in the original Greek. And it's accurate, but it really loses something significant. Throughout the rest of the New Testament, it's the primary word for grace. And Peter uses it twice here, bracketing this whole instruction. And listen to me. Peter's not saying that suffering is good. He's saying that God doesn't abandon you inside of it. The grace is not in the suffering itself. It's in who's present with you in it. And he's even calling out the idea of enduring suffering when you do wrong. Sometimes our suffering is something that happens because of our own choices or sin. That's consequence. That's the natural weight of our choices. And what Peter is saying here is that suffering that comes from doing good, from living as a Christian, that carries charis. Grace is present and active within it. Enduring unjust suffering while keeping your eyes on God isn't just admirable behavior. It's walking in something divinely graced. It says, for to this you have been called. That's what Peter writes in verse 21. I love that he used that word called. When I began my discernment process for eventually being ordained as a deacon here in the church, there were several levels of ensuring that I and the church were certain about my calling. And Peter's using that same idea here, but not just for ordained people. He's writing to household servants when he talks about calling. You have one. There's a little red book in front of you. It's called the Book of Common Prayer. Grab it, open it up to page 855. 855. And this is a page that's in the middle of what's called the outline of the faith, commonly called the catechism. And there's a question and an answer here that I want us to look at together. And it reads this: who are the ministers of the church? And the answer there is that the ministers of the church are the laypersons, bishops, priests, and deacons. And in my training, I learned that with everything in the Book of Common Prayer, order is important. If there's a list of things, the first one in the list is the ideal option. Notice that in our outline of the faith, the first ones listed as the ministers of the church are the laypersons. By the way, the deacons are last. I don't know what that's all about, but Peter is speaking to this idea. He's recognizing that the way we live our lives is a ministry to the people around us. And here's my favorite part of this. And Peter writes, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example so that you should follow in his steps. This idea of following Christ's example, the word here is hypogrammos. And this is the only time that this word shows up in the entire New Testament, and it literally describes a writing tablet students use to trace to learn their letters. Peter could have used any word for example or model. He chose this one. And what Peter is saying is that Christ is the pattern, and that we trace the shape of his life with our own. Listen carefully. You're not generating your own response to suffering. You're following the pattern that's already been made. There's one more thing that I want you to see to help us understand this pattern. In verse 23, Peter writes, when he was abused, he did not return abuse. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but he entrusted himself to the one who judges justly. And the word that I want you to see in here is paradidomai. And it's not he was handed over, it's he handed himself over. This is a posture of deep trust in the God who judges rightly. That line and the rest of verses 24 22 through 25 in our reading are heavy in Isaiah 53 language. You could even say that Peter is making a theological argument that Jesus is the suffering servant that Isaiah foresaw. And he carries it by suggesting that the people who follow Jesus are invited into that same servant identity. Watch how Peter lands this idea straight from the Isaiah 53 text. He says, "For you were going astray like sheep, but now you have returned to the shepherd and guardian of your souls." Psalm 23, which is also our psalm for this week, has three movements worth naming here. And we actually just had a spring retreat, right, guys, the youth, where we spent the weekend really digging in and exploring this psalm. But these three movements, the first word that we encounter in Psalm 23 is shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And the second is the valley. Even though I walk through the darkest valley or the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. And third is table. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And if you'll notice, there's a posture shift that happens there in that psalm. The psalmist David begins talking about God. Stuff is talking about God, and then when the valley comes, it shifts to around and saying, "Oh, the valley, God," and he's talking directly to him, right? You are with me. And where does the whole thing land? It lands at the table. Not a table of escape, a table of presence in the middle of everything. And when we come to this altar during the Eucharist, we come bringing all of our brokenness, our suffering, everything that we carry, and we meet him there. The one who was broken for us. I love how Peter handles all of this. He doesn't deny or minimize the suffering. He also doesn't baptize the unjust system that produces it either. Instead, he offers a third way. Endure it with dignity, trusting the outcome to a God who sees and judges justly, and recognize that Christ has already walked this exact path ahead of us. We don't need to make this up as we go. The pattern is already there. We're merely tracing the lines that have already been laid down. Tertullian, one of the early church fathers, wrote to Christians under Roman persecution around AD 200. And his words are worth hearing here. And he writes about how Christians who were suffering unjustly aren't losing. Rather, they're bearing witness by a different set of rules than what the empire is playing by. And almost 200 years after that, John Chrysostom preached a series on 1 Peter in which he leans into this charis language. And he says that the Roman calculus of honor was genuinely inverted from the Roman world's calculus. In a culture where social shame was devastating, Chrysostom told his congregations in Antioch that what looks like humiliation from the outside is, in God's economy, the location of real grace. That was true in Antioch in the 4th century. It was true for household servants in Asia Minor in the 1st. And it's true for us today. In just a few moments, when we come forward to this altar, I want to invite you to bring it. Bring the thing that's been done to you that wasn't fair. Bring the promotion you deserved and didn't get. Bring the relationship that ground you down. Bring the suffering that came not from your own choices, but simply from trying to live with integrity in a world that doesn't always reward that. Bring it. And lay it down with the one who meets you there. The one who was broken for us. The shepherd and guardian of our souls, who has already walked every step of this path ahead of us. By his wounds, you have been healed. Amen.